Peace.
Hello. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Sahami Pinard. I am the owner and founder of Awareness Mental Health is Wealth, a company I started to educate our community about mental health and destigmatize it so more of us are healing rather than hurting. I feel like for the most part, Black people have thought of those dealing with mental health issues as the crazy in the family. We don't talk about our problems outside of the family. Nobody likes to hear that they're in therapy or might need medication. So I think it's just more so a lack of knowledge, which is what encouraged me even more to start this, because it's not enough of us doing this and we're all hurting in some way. So if you have any questions about it, please send me DMs, send me questions. But I'm gonna share the screen too, but this topic right here, I've been trying to work on for a while, but then I got hit with a post about a young Black man that committed suicide, which I'm gonna share with all of you. I'm not sure if any of you were aware of it. I had posted it on my personal page. I don't know if any of you heard it, but this is Ty Mula. At least that's what he goes by on IG. And it's basically saying that he was sick of dealing with struggle. He was sick of thugging it out and going battle after battle, not the life that he envisioned. And I'm not sure if he felt comfortable, if he had a therapist or what the deal was, but the fact that he felt suicide was his only option, it just really kind of crushed me, because I'm pretty sure had he had therapy or just somebody he felt he could really be real about whatever the battles were, it wouldn't have ended like this. He looks like he's still in his 20s. And I feel this might be the story for a lot of Black men in our community, whether you're healing yourself, we'll put that in quotes, by numbing yourself out, partying, drinking, getting high, whatever it is, it's not necessarily helping you at the end of the day. So I got this panel together with a group of Black men, because I feel that's who needs to have this conversation, lead this conversation, and just to learn more about mental health and see if they can possibly help you either heal or get some resources that you need. I'll try to start off by introducing my panelists. I'll start with Tosin, because you're literally right next to me. So your name, your profession, if you're in the field of mental health, how long you've been in it.
Good evening. My name is Tosin Akindele. I am a therapist. I've been doing this for about, I don't even know, I want to say somewhere between 8 and 10 years. Got my degree, my master's degree from NYU. I currently do private practice under Therapy for Us by Us. I'm also a school social worker as well. And I also work with an organization called Men Healing, and we work with male identified survivors of sexual abuse, which is another population that's hardly ever spoken of and spoken about. So I work with men who have been sexually assaulted from birth to whenever it is that they are speaking out about it. So yeah, these conversations are necessary. These conversations are needed. I'm happy to be here. I love talking about this because the more we talk about it, the less stigmatized it becomes. So let's just, let's continue. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Friji, you right next to him, so please go ahead.
Hey, how you guys doing? The name is Friji Talisma. I've been working in the mental health space between 15 to 17 years. I am a therapist in a clinic in Brooklyn. I'm also work for an organization training their staff. So I train staff on mental illness. So I work for a large social service agency with lots of various programs in their training department, training their staff on mental illness. I said, I've been in the field for about that time. I worked in child welfare. I worked in the DOE. I worked with DHS. I mean, I don't know if everybody knows those acronyms: DOE, Department of Education; DHS, Department of Homeless Services; foster care system. I've been in a lot of different environments. Again, I think, thank you, Sahami. We go back, but these conversations are very important. So glad to be here. Hope to spread some knowledge to folks.
Thank you so much for being here. We'll keep it pushing to Mike. You're next.
Hey, what's going on? My name is Mike Pierre-Paul. Well, I'm a nurse. I'm an LPN. I'm the guy that the psychiatrists and psychologists give the order to give the mental health medication to the patients when they're in need of it. You know, I'm on my second book, going on my third book. It's all poetry based, but with these different types of topics, I personally feel that, you know, like Sahami said, we're not all through, you know, we all got some type of healing to do, but I feel like that writing puts me in a space that, you know, I don't feel like anybody could touch me when I'm writing. So I feel like that's my form of mental release and things of that nature. You know, so basically, once again, Mike Pierre-Paul.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Thank you. Ken, you're right next to him.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ken Bernard. So I'm a clinical social worker out here in New York. I do work with in child welfare, and I'm a facilitator in child welfare, and I do have my own private practice, which I see clients. I've been in the social service field for a little over 13 years. Been doing therapy for about 9 of those years. And I've been working in different realms when it comes to mental health. So I've worked in hospital settings. I've worked in the forensic setting where it's, you know, when we're talking about jails and prisons, rehab, outpatient substance abuse programs. So I've worked with quite a few quite a few different clientele. So I hope that I could bring some good content and gems to you folks. And I'm also here ready to pick up in anything that could help me in my practice as well.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. And last but not least, Darnell.
Hello, everyone. I'm Darnell Dorville. I go by Storyteller Gordon. That is my stage name, as I'm a writer and spoken word artist. I'm also the founder of a nonprofit organization called Form, Focused Operation to Redefine Masculinity. And I'm happy to be in this room. I hope I can contribute to this conversation because I am a Black man, and I certainly hope to build with the guys in this room.
Thank you so much, Darnell. All right. So I realized I probably introduced everyone else's background, but I didn't say anything about my own. So, yes, my name is Sahami Bernard, and I am a board certified psychiatric nurse practitioner. So I'm the one writing the orders. I'm also doing therapy. I have a private practice as well, and I run this company and do events such as these to help educate us and remove stigma. So that's my background. I've done detox, which is people dealing with drug abuse. I've done forensics, worked in jails. I've worked for outpatient clinics for homeless LGBTQ community. Currently, I just started with NYU, so I'll be helping their student campus population. So I've dibbled and dabbled in different fields of mental health. All right, so for my panelists, we're gonna get into the questions. And for those who just joined, if you do have a question that I don't ask or you really feel like you want to know an answer to, please feel free to DM it or not DM it, I'm speaking like I'm on IG, but drop it in the chat and I'll make sure our panelists answer it. First question, fellas, please. I don't know if you want to raise your hands or whoever just wants to tackle it, by all means. It's define masculinity. And is there a difference for Black men when defining masculinity?
I mean, I'll jump in there. So masculinity is characteristics or attributes or traits of a man, right? I think when people use the term masculinity, they're talking about characteristics like somebody being assertive, strong, a leader, independent, right? So, you know, that's like the worldview of what masculinity is just these traits that a person that's biologically born as a man should have and they should portray.
Is it different for a Black man? It doesn't have to be Free G. Any of my panelists can actually just grab onto that second part, unless you feel like you want to add more to the definition of masculinity. Ken, I'll go to you. Do you feel the definition of masculinity differs from a Black man?
Well, I think that when it comes to that definition in the Black community, there's more flavor to it. You know, there's more spice that we add to it on what we articulate as what does a masculine man look like, but there's going to be a spectrum. So we could be like, that man is more masculine than the other man. And how are we measuring that? We may look at it on, their brawn, on how tough they are. We may look at finances.
Okay.
We may look at, for some, they may look at it, how many women are they able to woo? You're looking at all these different aspects in our community. And that's how we tend to gauge the level of masculinity. It becomes a pressure, because now you may be trying to build up to reach that rubric that's in our community.
Okay. Darnell, I'll ask you, since you have your organization that sort of speaks about this. What do you feel about that question?
I think there's absolutely a difference for Black men, particularly in America, because it was defined here by white men before we got here. So they've actually defined what is masculine energy here, and we've just had to try to keep up. Oddly enough, I don't think we see these same debates around the word femininity, but we see it around the word feminism. But I digress. I think the reason there is a debate on defining masculinity is because it's often confused with patriarchy.
Meaning?
I think some of the things that Ken was talking about in terms of aggression and domination of women, in terms of who can get more women, who can basically emasculate the next man. And now it becomes a comparison. And I think those are more attributes attached to patriarchy as opposed to attached to masculinity. Because if we're talking about the energy and essence attributed to qualities and attributes of a man, why is it such a negative thing? Why have we assigned it so much negative connotations? And I think that's because it often gets confused with patriarchy.
Okay. So Tosin, I'll ask you, how do you feel society affects this definition for Black men?
This is such a tough one because historically we know what it means to be a Black man, and then we look at what society is doing to Black men these days, and how we're pinned against each other in regards to sexual identity, in regards to who's married, who's not, who's strong and who's weak, identified as also going into sex and race and everything like that. But also when we look at trauma and how that impacts what it means to be a man, from what I've been hearing and what I've seen is that whoever keeps their heads up and who doesn't falter and who isn't crying and who is not vulnerable, that makes you more of a man than the next person, which we know is not accurate because we're all in the field. But I talk to clients, and before they come into therapy, I've grown up like this. I always thought that being masculine and being a man was not being emotional and keeping my head up and being able to go through the fire and not, being able to provide for my family no matter what the stress is. But then they lose the aspect of the humanity of it, where it's okay to cry and it's okay to have conversations, it's okay to feel. So I definitely think society has played a major role in what it means to be a man and what we understand masculinity to be.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I'll ask you, because you're a nurse, Black man, you're also a poet, and you're doing all these extra things. How has society necessarily affected your definition of being a Black man and your masculinity? You have to unmute, Mike.
Oh,
Hey,
sorry. Yeah, I feel like that's like environmental also.
Okay.
Especially given where you grew up and who you grew up around. Especially me personally, being from Brooklyn, having to overcome a lot of different things, whether it be personal or environmental. Especially being tapped in with the streets also. That plays a whole other factor that we can't forget, because I grew up in the area of Flatbush Junction. It's really, I know plenty of Crips over there. So it's just certain things when you hanging out and you speaking on, you realize that a lot of these people, they need hugs. They lost. And I understand it now because that through my profession, I've been able to go and work different places, but still be able to stand on where I come from and never forget that. But it's just being around different types of folks that every now and then will let me know it's okay not to be okay. So I really feel like with being masculine or masculinity, I really feel like you got that book-based definition, but also growing up, the environment you're from can definitely alter your perception of what being masculine is, especially as a young Black male in America.
Thank you. So
I just want to add a caveat,
okay.
right? That in terms of masculinity being Black, I mean, race is important, right? Because like Tosin mentioned, the stuff about trauma, right? And within certain underserved communities or marginalized communities, there's always that kind of competitive stuff going on, like Ken was talking about. Yet there's a caveat that we're not talking about, which is like why men don't cry, or like that Black men have to kind of stay tough because the world doesn't really give us provision. There's no provisions that men get once they start sobbing and weeping, and there's no way to draw a definitive line, right? Because what happens if you say, okay, man, guys should be more emotional? Those folks that don't know how to interpret that that can take us off into the deep end, right? So oftentimes it's kind of hard, right, to not draw lines. And I think that's why I saw somebody said it's a construct. That's why these constructs kind of exist. They're generalizations. It doesn't mean you have to fit in a certain box. But for a Black man, especially, right, when we deal with so much adversity or the perception of adversity, we got so much to kind of fight for that it feels hard to sit and kind of get into your emotional bag, because men don't have the same community like, I'm gonna say like women do, to kind of like sit and console one another. We don't necessarily have that. And because of the lack of that, right, that's where you get all of that kind of fight, competitive nature, that kind of that all of those competitive elements. So, it's hard to not think of the construct and kind of adhere to construct, because I've seen a lot of people, because of the trauma, they're kind of stuck in a certain place, like Mike was mentioning, right? They stuck in a certain place, and because they kind of stuck in a certain place, they don't necessarily know how to get out of that. So the only thing they can do is kind of be strong to kind of keep pushing through. And there is no outlets with other men or other images of men kind of doing certain things. That's why like these conversations are powerful, because men don't really get together because of that competitive nature and actually talk about these things.
Okay. So Greg in the chat, I'm not sure if you can speak, or I don't know if you're mute at work, but if you can come off mute, if you can actually just reiterate what you wrote in the chat for everyone, or.
Oh, sure, no problem. I didn't know if we were allowed to even speak outside.
Yeah, if
of
I call on you, I'll take you off mute. It's cool.
No problem. But just to reiterate, I've always been somebody who understands masculinity to basically tie out to aggression, as well as, dominance. Those are basically the two keywords that I would use to describe masculinity that as I know it. And as I get older and I have children and I understand more about how their development is all based on what I teach them, I realize that I can teach you to be anything. You're not growing up to be masculine. You're learning to be an adult. You're learning to be a good person. And the key defining features of masculinity often are just toxic issues. So I like to eliminate the idea of masculinity and just focus on being a good person. Now, as far as how it works for Black men are not afforded the same opportunities to display their masculinity that white men are afforded. I think about the idea of just getting upset. White men are allowed to get upset in a way that Black men are not allowed to, because that will translate into you being arrested, shot, whatever it may be. And just for a number of other behaviors that white men are allowed to display through, and they get called masculine behaviors. You get to, I don't want to make this like a race thing. I don't want to make it an argument about Black and white, but It's just my opinion that white men are allowed to be a lot freer with their behaviors that are tied to masculinity than black men are allowed to be.
Okay. Thanks for sharing, Craig. Does anyone in my
No
panel
problem.
want to respond to that comment in terms of black men not being able to show as much quote unquote aggression as say a black man would?
Yeah, I agree with Greg. He definitely has hit something that a lot of people aren't acknowledging, which is that the space provided for us to show emotion. Let me backtrack. A lot of the black men don't know how to show emotion and how to communicate effectively.
Mhm.
So when you get to a situation where you have to show emotion, when you hold it in for so long and you don't, and eventually you explode, it comes off as aggression, not as somebody being annoyed, being upset. But like Greg was saying, when white men are, like he said, let's not make it a black and white thing. But I've seen white men get upset, storm out of a room. Nobody says, oh, he's angry. Nobody's worried. Nobody's scared or anything like that. But when black men get upset, because we typically don't express ourselves often enough, it can come off to people who don't know us as, oh, he's terrifying. Oh, he's aggressive. Oh, he's scared. So keeping all of that in mind also can make somebody say, okay, I'm not going to express the way I feel because these people are not ready to hear me. But it does definitely go back to raising your children and allowing children to be effective communicators, allowing children to cry, allowing children to have conversations, and not just saying, no, you can't do that. Don't ask me why. Or no, you can't say, like, you can't talk that way. Don't ask me why. But being able to explain situations to kids. I have a son, so I've a lot of practice with being patient and sitting down with him, a 6-year-old son, and sitting down with him and having conversations and letting him express his feelings, even if I'm gonna say no, allow him to say why he wants to do something or why he feels the same way. And me saying, okay, I understand how you feel, but this is why daddy's saying you can't do this. So not just you can't do that, go sit down, and not being allowed to cry. Or, I've seen parents tell their kids, tell their sons, fathers tell their sons, don't cry. It's not that big of a deal. Shut up. Like all of that stuff is damaging. And that manifests in so many different ways the older you get, where you don't even communicate in relationships, whether you're with your friends, whether you're talking to families, and especially romantic relationships. So it does all connect, and it does definitely spiral as you get older, the less you're able to communicate.
Thanks for answering. So since we are on the topic of emotions and how black men express themselves, my next question is, why can't y'all cry?
I think, I'm sorry. I'm gonna chime in here. I think it's not that we can't cry.
Mhm.
It's also about who cares when we do.
Got it.
Because oftentimes, if the problem is going to be existing tomorrow, I can't just get into my feelings and internalize that, because I still got to get the bills paid. I still got work to do. So sometimes, like, even crying, even tapping into emotions, it's a luxury. And sometimes it's not a luxury our people have always had. You know what I mean? I got to get up and get the bills paid tomorrow, no matter how I'm feeling. So better me not feel it today, better me not feel it tomorrow. I'll deal with it on the weekend. I'll deal with it when I have time. And we do that to our own emotions all the time. So I don't know how much will actually be heard if we cry anyway. Like, who really cares? Like, really?
Ken?
I want to add, and this is related somewhat to what Tosin was talking about earlier, and the question of why can't we cry? It's like, it looks like we're not crying, but what's happening is we channel our energy into that feeling of anger. So a lot of times we are crying, but you're going to see us punching that wall, or you're going to see us yelling, or you're going to see us in that intensity, but that's us crying right there. Because we've just been conditioned to kind of channel it through there. The first thing when we're little as boys, the first thing we do, if we fall, someone comes and runs and say, don't cry, you're okay, right? And, they may react differently if it's your daughter versus your son. And that sticks with us. And it sticks with us for until we get into adulthood. So now we don't have that outlet. We haven't practiced crying. So it feels like it looks like we're not crying, but we're crying in the way that we know best. And that's not all, because you're gonna You're gonna get some men who are crybabies, and then you're gonna get some men
See?
who
Why crybabies? Why
right?
bad terminology?
That's a bad
Why y'all
term.
not crying?
But I sometimes I get a little comedic when I explain myself. But
Okay.
when I say that, it's you're gonna get people men who really cry a lot, and they have no shame in it. I'm gonna cry, and it becomes. I think that once a guy gets that cry out, when they really hit that plateau of understanding, it kind of feels refreshing for them after a while. I know that the time that I always recall where I really cried the most in my life was with my grandmother passing away, and she was dearest to my heart. And I never cried like that before, and I cried in front of an entire church while I was doing a speech for her. And that was probably the most people I ever cried in front of in my life. But in that environment, it was like it's accepted that you cry at a funeral. But in other environments, after a game, we're playing ball, we lose. Sometimes we cry, we may console our teammate. But in other areas where we may take a loss in a different area, in like let's say we get a breakup, or we were supposed to get something that didn't work out and we may cry, first thing people are doing is trying to mute us from crying. So, and then we take it out in aggression, or we take it out in anger. And sometimes aggression may not look like, all right, he's ready to fight. You know, it may just be, now I'm sublimating, I'm putting that energy into something else, but it may not be positive. Or it may come out where I'm crying, but instead of crying to a friend, I'm picking up a bottle and I'm drinking. Or I'm gonna go to my local weed guy and pick up more weed so I could smoke all night to kind of numb myself. But we're crying at those moments.
Okay, so to go back, for those who aren't in the mental health field or who haven't, I see a hand raised, I'm gonna call it, but define sublimating.
It's pretty much like when you have a specific feeling. Let's say anger is the most easiest one. You have a feeling of anger, and you may have some difficulty managing your anger. But what you do now is like you're choosing to channel it into something more productive, right? And it could look like, all right, there may be it may be a child who has difficulty managing their anger, but when they go on a football field and they're playing, and they may show that aggression, which is look positively on the football field against the opponents, and he may get rewarded for that anger, versus if he goes and has a tantrum at home and it's looked at negatively.
Definitely. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't get to see the name of who had their hand raised. Can you come off mute and ask or make a comment or ask your question?
That was me.
I don't know I know this is probably an abbreviation, those letters there, but how do you, from when you began therapy, right, from where you were prior to therapy and then where you are now, like, how would you scale how you've been managing yourself? Like 10 being like, I feel super equipped to deal with any stressors in life or managing certain traumas, and 0 meaning like, I still feel like I can't do anything to help myself. How did it change from when you started therapy to where you're at now?
I mean, I'm a little better because, you know, I got a chance to speak about things that I just kept inside of me for a long time.
Now define what you feel mental health is. Darnell, I'll actually start with you.
To me, mental health, I guess my definition, personal definition, has always been the fitness or wellness of one's state of mind. Like, I like to define it as mental fitness because there are going to be days that you are just out of shape. Doesn't mean you necessarily have you know, an inherent problem, but there are going to be days that you're out of shape, and that varies from person to person. So my out of shape can be great for you, or your out of shape can be great for me, but for me, I'm not operating at 100% today, and we need to be able to be honest about that. So I think that some men have that luxury, but I also believe that we're fooling ourselves in a world where we tell men to take care of your mental health, but in the next breath tell them hustle harder. So it creates this kind of like the demand on men it's not realistic for when they tell us like, you know, practice these mental health things. And I'm a firm advocate of it, but also maybe the world needs to, we still need to change what some of the issues of the world are before we can really get into this mental health conversation.
Okay. Mike, what about you?
I definitely feel like mental health is definitely like as homie just said, is definitely exercising your mental space, and not more like because when you say mental health, a lot of people definitely think that it's more of things that are mentally inherited from a medical standpoint, but it's also, you know, like just even finances could put you in a bad mental space. You know, maybe not having enough of it, or the construct of society telling you you need to be this way to be a man. Because even as a man, for you to catch up to be on a certain level, you know, mentally, when you ain't got it financially, mentally, it messes you up. And I'm not, in our community, we've all seen that. I'm not, you know, which is why a lot of people do some of the heinous crimes they do, or they take some of the chances that they take to actually get it. Then when they get it, they feel good at the time being, no matter how they got it, even if they really risk their life for it, you know. So I truly feel, especially, you know, in our culture, being Black and where we are from, I definitely feel that finances definitely play a major role into our mental well-being, you know, because then we end up doing certain things that, you know, we end up regretting, and it sticks with us, and that messes us up mentally also. So I definitely feel like you know, just yeah, mental health to me is that aspect of it, of actually just trying to attain certain things, and it confuses, especially when you feel like, you know, you start to feel like you deserve this, or you feel entitled, like you know you are owed this, and not understanding, you know, learning to separate the difference between, as the young man just said, of hustling harder and making sure your mental is right. So when you don't have what it is, where finances is what makes you happy, when you don't have that, you could still be okay mentally without the financial construct that society places that burden on us.
Okay, thanks. Freeji, what about you?
So mental illness is, you know, so, you know,
Well, not just illness, mental health overall.
all right. Well, mental health overall, I think, is like life has challenges, right? We're going to have challenges either with thinking, either with how we feel, either with how we behave or how we act. But when those problems or challenges become so overwhelming that it impacts your functioning, right? Like Mike's mentioning about the money aspect, like if whatever you got going on in your mind, how with your feelings, with how you behave, whatever those challenges are, they get so great that it's impacting your functioning, right? I think that's where we get into like the illness aspect, the struggles aspect, and I think in life there's like four main domains. That's like the financial stuff, there's the social element, there's the meaningful activity stuff that give you structure, purpose, and also wellness, right? Like, and this is the different things that people were mentioning. So I think there's like these four main domains. It's like these accounts that we all have. I think of them like different bank accounts that we have to have a healthy balance in. And for us to have a healthy balance in that, usually if you see somebody dealing with mental health issues or challenges, it means there's like a depletion in one of those accounts. And I think they're all important. It's not one over the other, but sometimes like we live in capitalism, so money is really important, right? Access to quality stuff, like we, you know, if you come from poverty in certain, you know, domains, is going to impact your wellness abilities, right? men, we're not as socially calibrated. Like men are not as socially calibrated as women. We don't engage the same way. So there's a lot of feedback loops that men don't get, right? Like we're not talking to one another about different things. And I think it's important for men to talk as a collective, right? Because only men really understand men's struggles. So far too often, even when you hear something like, why don't men cry? It's like, that's not how men necessarily express themselves, right? Like we express ourselves in different ways. But, men can express, maybe there's like social implications. You'll hear the term toxic masculinity, but certain men, we just express in different ways. And, so a lot of that has to do with it. So it's really about like how do we deal with like distress and problems functioning? And I think problems functioning can be a complex idea. So there's a lot of these different domains. And if we don't have a healthy account in these domains, we're going to have a lot of struggles, and it's going to spill into others. If we don't have a healthy social network, it could impact your finances. It can impact your wellness. If you don't have economics, it could impact your socially, your meaningful activity, your wellness. So it's about having a healthy, these accounts in a healthy state and a balanced approach, right? So that you could kind of thrive and be the healthiest possible.
Okay. So my next question is, do you think Black men are now taking care of their mental health? Like, I feel like this last year, especially with the pandemic, more people became okay with the idea of, hey, I'm in therapy. Hey, I do have a therapist, or I'm on medication. Is that really the narrative for Black men? Tosin?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because the majority of my clientele are Black men. And it's absolutely beautiful, because I get emails and these men are saying how they've been thinking about this for a while. They're ready to take the next step. And it's been beautiful to see, to say the least. So, and I think having these conversations like we're having now has played a major role into that, in that where it's not taboo anymore. Like, saying that you have depression, or saying that you suffer from anxiety, or saying that, hey, my best friend died last month and I'm still not okay, or my mom died 16 years ago and I still miss her like crazy. And having these conversations is not something that, people look at you and say, yo, you're nuts. It's like, okay, cool, let's talk about it. And therapy is in now, we want to say that's good or not, whatever it is, but the conversation is starting. So I definitely think that the majority of us are absolutely talking about it, and I just hope it continues. And then I also, on the other hand, I've seen partners like girlfriends, wives, moms reach out to me for their sons and their boyfriends. So even if the men are not doing it, somebody in their household is saying, hey, you should let's consider talking about this to somebody. So we're definitely on the right path.
Nice. You actually opened up the question field to my next question, but I do want one of my other panelists to answer the same question. Ken, what about you? Do you feel more Black men are open to mental health treatment, or even just starting therapy? Oh, you're on mute, Ken.
You put me on mute. That's
why I'm sorry.
All right. But yes, I definitely think that it feels like it's a trend, but it's more, I feel like we're becoming more insightful in our communities about it. And as Tosin said, that even now, even our surrounding or our extended relatives, our partners, our siblings, they are taking the initiative to kind of open that dialogue up as well. Because I do get calls from parents about therapy. And I also get calls where some men, they're on the fence. We call that the pre-contemplation and contemplation stage, and they're on the fence about it. And they may give me a call this week, and I might not hear from them for a whole month. And they're like, hey, remember we spoke about a month ago, I think I'm ready. And just seeing that alone is like, at least they're cycling these thoughts and they're open to it. So I give them a lot of validation around that. And I always continue to keep, like, even if we were talking before this, before we started the Zoom, and we were talking about availability. And even if I'm not available, I try to leave them with something to empower them to continue to look, because finding a therapist becomes another journey within itself. So, we want to continue to keep them empowered and open to the idea because it is helpful. And as the story writer Gordon has said, when we work out, when we're exercising our mental health, it may look different. If I fall off, my mental health falling off may look different than someone else's. But when I talk to people, like they ask, hey, what's therapy? I'm like, I'm pretty much like, a gym trainer for you. Instead of working on muscles, we're working on your mental health, and they grasp it a lot quicker when I begin to use those metaphors in there. So I feel like, yes, it's definitely changed.
Okay, so I'm going to try to read some of them. I'm not going to be able to get to all the comments, but I'll try to read this last one. It says, the glue that is the root of our mental health as Black men is poverty. Poverty is very traumatic. Everything that poverty causes is a contributing factor to our collective mental decay. From subpar living conditions to a lack of healthy meals to being able to go see a movie with friends just for a moment of fun, all has contributed to our traumatic state. Any comments?
This is what I was talking about earlier with finances, because even growing up, I can remember being evicted 2 or 3 times. And if you ever been through that or felt that to even overcome that, those are the times I thought about suicide, thought about it. Never actually knew I was going to do it or if I actually wanted to. To just be sleeping on a family member's couch that you probably you ask yourself, damn, that's not a place I would ever want to be at because of the circumstances. Not once, not twice, but 3 times it happened until I'm like, hey, I had to take my life into my own hands, but still at an early age, at a real early age. So it's like, never had time to stop or play video games or even learn some of these video games that I see all these kids playing nowadays, because it was always got to keep moving. So definitely poverty, definitely plays into your mental health. Being able to overcome it, I never went to therapy for it. And I can't say at the time when you're dealing with that situation, you're dealing with you need a place to live. I personally don't think therapy would help me, because that's not going to place me in, because, shelter is safety. That's not going to place me in a habitat that I need to be in, living as the next person who might be talking to me and, advising me, because I'm not going to see what a therapist is telling me at that moment, because my next step is, listen, I need a spot to live. I need furniture. I need a bed to sleep on, the basic things of living besides oxygen and water and things of that nature. So definitely poverty, as I said earlier, finances do affect, you just got to be a person where when you get to, and I got to where I'm at and I don't feel I'm anywhere yet, but I know 10 years ago where I was at 10 years ago, I'm not there. So I think just looking back at that and keep pushing and pushing and not giving up, looking back at that has put me in a position where now if I have a couple thousand in my pocket or if I have $1 in my pocket, I still smile and it's genuine, as opposed with 10 years ago, that smile, I wasn't cracking a smile. I was just mad, period.
Okay, so you opened up actually my next topic too. So I definitely understand. I think all my panelists will probably agree. Something we all learn from mental health psychology. It's like those 5 hierarchy of needs, right? So that basic one of physiological needs. If you're not hitting that, then we know we're not reaching you. So I can definitely understand what you're saying when you say, if I don't have a place to live, I don't really care that I need to cry and deal with whatever trauma I was in the past. Right now, I need food. Right now, I need a place to live and make sure that I'm safe at night. So definitely get that. But I want to ask all of you, what do you feel are, let's say, top 3 contributing factors that are either helping or hurting Black men's mental health?
I think when it comes to mental health, self-care is pivotal in the Black, for anybody, just self-care in general. I don't care if you're a Black man, white man, Black woman, self-care is very important. And, a lot of times we take it for granted. We're caught in like the rat race of things and we're hustling and bustling. We never slow down. And that's something the pandemic had allowed us to it forced us to slow down for a moment and really begin to look in the mirror and reflect on things. So self-care is very important. And I think that if we don't pour into our self-care enough, that's when we have that mental health decompensation happening. So, that's something that I would definitely say is pivotal.
Okay. Friji, what about you? What do you feel is one of the biggest things contributing to Black men's mental health, either good or bad?
So, and this is like reiterating what people were saying earlier, but poverty, money, right? Because we a little simple, so in my mind, sometimes it's money will really damage someone's mental health, healthy relationships, right? And trauma, right? Like that stored trauma that people got, right? Like that really, it makes it hard for us to kind of process and think things out because there could be a lot going on in the mind. So trauma, healthy relationships, right? And I mean healthy relationships, right? Because a lot of people are in unhealthy relationships, and poverty, money, right? Toxic masculinity. Let's talk about toxic relationships too, right? But yeah, so those are the the top three things I'm just thinking off the top of my head.
Okay, Tosin.
I wish you would have called me before you go Friji. He took all my answers.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's all good. The biggest, everything for me comes back to trauma because I'm a trauma therapist. But the biggest thing to me is that it's unaddressed trauma, suppression of whatever issues that's happened in your life that you've suppressed and you haven't dealt with, and poor communication. I think poor communication can drive somebody nuts, especially when you're in a relationship where all you do is fight with your significant other and there's no peace. Like that can shake up your mind, and you don't want to go home. So those three, I don't want to take up too much space, but those three are genuinely it, part of it for me.
Oh, that's fine. So we have like a back and forth going on right now in the chat. So Miss Senior is saying you can't therapy your way out of therapy, but a peace of mind is worth so much more and will definitely be the drive to support and escape from poverty. And of course, we've kind of gone. Are you able to come off mute? I don't know if you're at work, and kind of elaborate on that, why you feel like a peace of mind might be worth more than finances.
Okay, I just want to say, and I mentioned this earlier,
Yeah.
I think far too often that happens. People are putting more weight in one bucket than the other. And yes, peace of mind, that stuff is really important, but you can't peace of mind without, like Mike was talking about, a place to live.
Yeah,
like, peace of mind it's not going to give you a place to live, some food in your belly. Like it's going to get really hard if you got a family and people to provide for, and you ain't got no financial resources to support yourself. So yes, certain things are important, but I think it's an issue when we put too much weight in certain areas than others, because it's about a healthy balance. Life ain't seen through like a tiny funnel. There's more things than that. And far too often when people got problems, what we need to learn to do is take steps back, right? Because far too often the trouble's happening because we so dialed into that one siloed thing and we're not really looking at the full framework or the bigger picture. And if we take a step back, we can learn more things and learn the different opportunities to overcome or deal with challenges, right? Because you might think it's about finances, getting a job, and it might just be you need to change your network, get around some people that get you connections to jobs,
yeah,
right? Or get around some people that help you feel safe to talk about challenges, right? So
okay. So Mike, you have something to say? After Mike,
Yeah,
you can come off mute and just say some of the comments you're putting in the chat as well.
Yeah, I'll tap in on what Mr. Frederick was saying. Is that getting around those networks, just being out there, moving around, going from state to state, it requires money. Getting around those networks, being in those rooms, to be in those conversations, it requires money. I don't care what anybody tell me, because I know money attracts money. Money puts you in places that, whether you got a Harvard degree or don't have a Harvard degree, whether you could create business plans or cannot, it puts you in places that, the average Joe person ain't in. And there was a statistic a few years ago. They asked a mother, what does she think about when she go to bed? Her kids. You ask a man who has a family to provide for, what does he think about before he go to bed? 9 out of 10, this was statistically, it was finances. Yeah. That's the last thing. I'm a man, I got to provide. That's the last thing on my mind before I go to sleep. And sometimes that right there, if certain things are not in order, it's going to keep me from sleeping. So me personally, I mean, it might be my opinion or to certain people based on the realm and things that they're around. But I truly believe that I'm not saying money is the end all be all. That's not what I'm trying to say. But having money places you, it puts you in rooms of different conversations and where you're tapped in with other people who just tend to look at you different because they like, okay, if he could be here, then you know, he's not rich or wealthy or anything, but you know, whatever it is, whether it was 200, 300, it afforded him to be able to be here and to get that first bit of networking. Then it's what you do with it after that.
Okay. So Bjorn, before you speak, so I do want to say, again, I don't feel Mike is saying, like he said, that money is the end all be all, but do understand that even as us for women, when we look for suitable partners, you're looking to see somebody who can provide at the end of the day. So I can understand from a man's perspective, why it would be finances. That's something that plays on your head. We have songs like No Scrubs, sitting on the passenger side of your best friend's ride, and we were singing that to the tops. Hopefully I'm not dating myself, but that played out for years. It can still come on, and trust every single one of you that grew up in that era is singing it, because that's not what you're looking for. Why? Because at the end of the day, a man is supposed to be able to provide. So I'm not, again, I don't think Mike is saying money is the end all be all, but when your physiological needs aren't met, which is usually provided by, unfortunately, in this society with money, then no, a peace of mind or therapy might not be what you're hitting on. Even for me during the pandemic with awareness, I definitely stressed therapy. I definitely stressed getting help for it. But I also knew that during a pandemic where people couldn't go out, that might not have been the primary thing on their list. They're looking for toilet paper, they were looking for Lysol cans. So my primary thing became is, where can I connect them with these resources? Because once your physiological needs are met, then you kind of free up your mind a little bit more to start thinking, okay, what else do I need? What else really needs to be taken care of? And the pandemic lets you see that it was my mind, it was your mental health. So Bjorn, go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
One more thing, not just this last thing. Even you, when you starting your own, you know, venturing out, and you know, you took a chance on yourself, right? And I've seen you hustling. I've been to your events. That's fine. Those finances were what allowed you to even have this, what's going on, because you had to build that.
Yeah.
You know, you had to build that network. So that right there. So, you know, even you, as you saying right now, could definitely attest to that. You know what I mean? And
True.
I'll silence myself.
Very true. Bjorn, what's good? Hey.
Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you. So go ahead. What were your comments?
Am I repeating a comment? What was the question?
Which one? So you said there are rich people who don't have peace of mind. So
Yeah,
let's
that's
go with
true.
that since we're talking about finance and peace of mind and mental health.
Yeah, because I think that having your finances in order is
As a
much
Black
more-
man, remember, from your perspective.
especially as a Black man, is, well, let's just say it's the first thing that your typical Black woman especially wants to know about you before anything else matters. Not your character, not your, I don't know, your aspirations. What do you have right now? So your value pretty much boils down to a dollar sign, and that's pretty much it. And in terms of, I guess you can say the mental health aspect of it, it presents a problem because even if you have your finances in order, you can literally just be pretty much used as, let's just say, like a battery, you know, where all you are good for is providing something that contributes to someone else's lifestyle. I know, just me personally, what the pandemic has kind of brought to light is that my role as a husband and father is one where I pretty much just give. And it's not something that I thought would be the case before I even ever stepped into this kind of position. But that's essentially the sentiment that I've kind of realized over the past couple months. And I think a lot of this is kind of intertwined, but it should be separated. So having your finances in order, yeah, it's nice, but it doesn't solve all the problems. Because if it did, you wouldn't have you know, your wealthy, well-off type of Black man especially still complaining or still feeling unfulfilled or unhappy or, you know, separated from whatever, you know, is important to that person, be it, you know, his family, his wife, his children. You can still essentially feel like an outsider, even if you're hitting that main role or that main goal of bringing the finances in. So it really doesn't solve that much. It's basically just your ticket to the dance. So once you get in, you're in, but you're not really there yet.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. So several of you kind of touched the whole aspect of women and how you're viewed. How I have a question here that, let's see, how do Black women affect Black men's mental health? Or rather, yeah, no, we'll keep it to that question. Because I have this picture, which I'll share. Right here. So I shared this on my page because I found it and I was like, oh, wow, this is serious. But I also know for it to be true. So to my panelists, especially my therapists, what do you think about this picture?
Are we strictly talking about Black men and Black women? Because this is something that,
Well, women in general, this just happened to be the picture, but you can do women in general.
well, yeah, I mean, as a Black man, I would want my woman to be supportive and encouraging and loving and supporting and not, you know, and not put me down or, you know, make me less and make me feel less. So if you're dealing with somebody who makes you feel that way, then of course it's going to impact your mental and your capabilities to prosper in life and do, you know, and provide for the family because you're not happy. It all goes back to being happy. You're more willing to give when you're happy and you feel like somebody's also pouring into you. You can't pour from an empty cup. So if your cup is never being filled, then you have nothing to give and you don't want to give. So it can definitely impact it. This is why I preach effective communication. And just because you've been in a relationship for a certain amount of years doesn't mean you have to continue to be in that relationship. Get out if it's bad. But people don't want to hear that.
All right, Freeji, what about you?
You know, he caught on and then it made a bad situation worse, right? And I think there's a lot of relationships going on like that. And that image that you just showed, I think further perpetuates that. Like a man really he doesn't communicate the same as a woman. So when a woman is coming at a guy and yelling at a guy, the man is just kind of left to kind of just sit there. And oftentimes guys black out and then things go from bad to worse. And then he's vilified, right? And then there's an image that's perpetuated in society. And I think it's happening far too often. So I'm not saying that's all relationships, but there's a lot of relationships like that.
So Ken, what about you? How do Black women affect Black men's mental health or just men, women, period, in relationships?
Well, I mean, when it comes to it, you know, as men, for the most part, we hope to get validation from our partner. And if we don't get that and we're being emasculated or things that are happening in the relationship where we feel like we're not being heard, that becomes a major factor in just the chemistry between, you know, between the couples. But we definitely value, you know, the thoughts, the opinions of you know, the female woman in our lives, right? Even if they're not in our lives, you know, I mean, we were once all at some point in time probably in a position where we were trying to holler at somebody or being hollered at. And there could be situations there where something could be said that could really deflate your ego. And you're really holding on to that. And you may now take that and put it into something else or utilize that. That might be a thought in your mind as you approach another woman. And it could impact your judgment. It could impact your behaviors. So it does have a significant impact. And with that image that you just showed, a lot of times that's what's happening, and it's happening in front of the children. You know, they're seeing this, they're witnessing this, and they're going through the trauma. And that's traumatic on the guy, it's traumatic on the woman in there, it's traumatic on all parties there. So it just becomes a very unhealthy and toxic situation. And that's where, as Fiji said, sometimes we may not have effective ways in responding to that. And then those kind of issues happen, a domestic violence issue. But that's where the mental health comes in piece. Like, how can I become more able to regulate or manage my emotion? Can I get into, a lot of times in therapy for men, we talk about vulnerability. It's like, can I have a therapist and open up, discuss my vulnerabilities? It doesn't make me weak, but I have to understand my weaknesses so I could strengthen them. I have to understand my strengths so I can utilize them. Mm-hmm. So, the woman's part in our lives is very important. I think that just universally, we have to be more conscious, whether we're, the man or the woman, we have to be more conscious on how we treat people, because it definitely can carry on beyond that conversation.
Like, this topic that you just brought up kind of goes hand in hand with the one that you asked before. And just to keep it real short and simple, that relationships are have a major part to play in mental health, Black men's mental health, especially as the fulfilling role of a provider. You out in the world all day and just fighting and doing what you need to provide for your family. The last thing you want to do is come home. Having a peaceful household. If you don't have a peaceful household, you ain't gonna have no peace of mind. I think it's a lot of stresses, a lot of things that Black men have to take into consideration just stepping out into the world on a regular basis, to then come home and have to go back and forth with their significant other. I think that's a very troubling, has a very negative impact on mental health. And again, like discussions like this, what we're doing here, these are like steps in the right direction to solve some of the problems we have. That's pretty much it.
Okay, thanks. So I'm gonna ask one final question, and then I'm gonna open it up to everybody that's here to ask any final questions of the panelists. So I guess my final question would be is, how do we change this narrative? What do Black men need to feel supported, that they can be vulnerable, that they can seek out mental health treatment, whether that be therapy or even medication? Like, we speak a lot about therapy, but I've had young Black men come to my office and I'm diagnosing them for the first time with either depression or bipolar depression specifically. And they're like, nah, that's not it. They're not ready to hear these diagnoses. They're not ready to think that they need medication to be okay. They rather go self-medicate. Most of the times, either getting high, partying, drinking, relationships, whatever else it is. So how do we change this narrative? How do we make it okay to be in mental health treatment? Switch up the view.
So just to say, I think this dialogue, like things like this, having, more open spaces for men to kind of talk. I think that's one of the biggest things, like the stigma. You got to kind of break down the stigma of mental illness. And I think O mentioned this earlier, like, culturally, this is things that you see on TV, and it's mental illness is still new, right? And although the conversations are happening, it needs to increase. We need kind of safe spaces to talk. Men got to learn to get together to talk. But, you can't change somebody that doesn't want to be changed, right? So first, that person has to be conscious, right? But I think having more dialogue, I think the power of the media to kind of bring further awareness to help break the stigma, that's like a step in the right direction. And once men can get together, because one of the biggest things I see, especially with all my Black clients, Black male clients, is they've never seen a Black male therapist, right? I could be the first Black male person they've ever encountered in therapy. And a lot of that is, when we relatable and we can have certain types of discourse, dialogue, that's a sigh of relief, right? And I've had men that, we've been talking for years, and then they start to open up about things, right? This is a process, this is a journey, right? But the fact that you could see more people talking about it, the fact that you have if we could heighten awareness and get more male therapists out there, get more media coverage, continue this kind of conversation, I think that's a step in the right direction.
Ken, what about you? What do you think Black men need to feel supported in their journey with mental health?
I mean, pretty much like Freedy said, availability, it being out there. I think like platforms like this where anyone could join, you don't necessarily have to have insurance, to join the Zoom, and you could just listen in. You may not have an opinion, you may be indifferent about things, but at least you could listen in and gain some more understanding. I think that a lot of times we've reached a point where mental health has been a reactive intervention versus a preventive intervention for our Black communities. It's like, all right, there's an episode that just happened. There was a suicide attempt. There was suicidal ideation. ACS is in your house. Like a crisis is happening, and then we're getting into mental health. And we need to begin to be more preventive. It's like, all right, I might be okay. I feel all right. I don't feel depressed. I don't feel anxious. I'm not hearing voices. I'm not going through any symptoms that may make me feel that my mental health is compromised, but let me speak to a professional just to rule out, just to strengthen my tools, just to reassess myself to see if there's something that I'm missing, So these are some things for us to pay attention to. And I think a lot of times too, people don't have the proper expectations with mental health. And it's like, all right, I'm here, fix me. And like Freedy said, if you're not ready to change, we can't work together. We could sit here and talk, but you have to put things into action. You have to begin to open up around certain things. So I think that if we continue to have these platforms available to the public, that will help. If we begin to utilize it more on a preventive level instead of a reactive level, that will help as well.
Thank you. Darnell, what about you?
Oh, hey. Yeah, you can't let Freedy go first, man, because he kind of used up all the points and then, ain't nothing left. But I'll touch on something that's been said. I think therapy wasn't a safe space for Black people for a long time because, just being honest, we were sitting on the couches of our oppressors. So it probably didn't start as a natural thing. So the beauty of today is that we do have the options. We have 5 or 6 Black mental health professionals in this room, and that's a beautiful thing. And that alone will help to shift and change the conversation. But also, like Ken said, it comes with understanding, but also knowing that you aren't alone in the thoughts that you're having. When you feel like you're down, when you feel like you want to give up, like understanding that, and social media probably helped with that as well, because everything came to the surface because we are more aware of other individuals' problems. But for it to change with men in general, I think the conversation around masculinity and how we define that needs to change as well.
Mike, what about you? Thanks, Darnell.
I watch and listen to a lot of interviews and podcasts, and that also helps me channel with, dealing with the outside world and dealing with other people and meeting people every day, having different conversations. But also, I up until maybe 5-6 years ago, if you say mental health to somebody, even now when I'm around some of the psychologists and the psychiatrists that I work with, the psychiatrists who write meds, their solution was always prescribing medications.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not always, that's why a lot of us, when you tell me go see a therapist, the first thing I'm gonna say, I'm not looking to be diagnosed personally. I just want to talk to somebody. I just want to be able to be vulnerable for at least 5 minutes without feeling like you trying to assess me, because a lot of that happens, all around the world. I mean, I always tell people, in that New York minute, you could tell a New Yorker, a real New Yorker, for me personally, when you hit the street, you got to be able to assess somebody within a second, a minute, to understand, for your safety. But I feel like, mental health conversations are great. depending on who's pushing the envelope and what's the agenda. You know, I like this right here is beautiful. You know, there's a podcast I watch late at night. It's called Fresh and Fit Podcast, which is about men and men chiming in and talking. Like, it's a lot of following, you know, things of that nature. And I'm not saying that's therapy, but for me, it helps. It helps knowing that there are other men out there who feel this way and things of that nature. But definitely, you know, when I speak to the psychologist or psychiatrist, you know, I often say chime in to me, be like, listen, you know, some of the people you see sometimes they're not there for meds. You know, they might just want to talk. You know what I mean? I really feel, you know, a lot of people that say mental health is wealth, and this, that, and the third, and even people on bigger platforms. I heard people say, listen, sometimes, yeah, you pushing that agenda, but it's like, you know, sometimes you can see through the bullshit because you got new meds every day that you want to try out on people. You know what I mean? You got new medications that other, you know, all these new different, you know, Pfizer, these companies are coming up because they just want to see, does it work? You know what I mean? So if I come to speak to you, naturally, I'm not interested right off the bat on a diagnosis or medication, depending on the level of assessment you might see. Sometimes, you know, a therapist might be, you know, far beyond able to help me. But I'm just saying overall, if I'm not far going out there, if I'm just coming to talk and want to be vulnerable and want to have these discussions as we're having on this panel here tonight, and I'm doing it on a one-on-one base, I don't want to feel like, you know, if I'm depressed, the first thing you're going to send me is like, oh, try to start me on a low dose of Celexa or something like that, you know, so.
So thanks, Mike. Tosin, you're gonna round up, but I do want to make one note since we are talking about medication. Never start off with somebody that can prescribe medication. That's coming from me as a person who writes medication for psychiatry. When I first started looking for therapy, I thought psychiatrists did therapy as well. So I made an appointment with one and I went there. Within 5 minutes, she already had her prescription pad out and she was ready to write me on Wellbutrin. And I'm like, are you gonna listen to the rest? Like now that I'm in the field and I do this, a therapy intake initial should be about 45 minutes. So they should know way more about you than I was sad for the last 2 days. They should not be writing a prescription. So I made it just for me. After leaving that appointment, I went on Google, started researching, and that's how I found Psychology Today. And I specifically looked for people who could not prescribe medication, because if you can't do that, what are you left with? You have to listen to me and hear what it is that I'm saying. So that whole vulnerability part and not being used as a guinea pig, I'm all for it. And again, this is coming from someone who can write prescriptions, but I hate starting patients off with medication.
Because as you know, right now, currently, that's where the world is turning into. Like where you know, a lot of monetary gains from being in it, because millions and millions is being spent on, you know, so is being able to decipher between who really genuinely wants to listen to you and who just wants to push that, you know, those script on these meds, and you know, so.
And again, I'm not pushing any of you, especially my Black men in here. Not all of us are ready to just push a pill on you. I'm definitely not big on medication. I'm going to listen to whatever my patient has to say first. I'm very big on pushing them into therapy. But if that person is pulling out a prescription pad on you within the first 5, 10, within the first visit, unless it's a safety issue where you're talking about, I'm contemplating suicide, I'm seeing things, I'm hearing things, and I'm thinking about hurting somebody else, then I could possibly understand even talking about medication, but it shouldn't be within the first 5 to 10 minutes. If you're talking about depression or anxiety, or, you know, I just lost someone, or I'm going through a relationship issue, why is the prescription pad at that point? Like, it should not be out. But again, that's just me. Tosin, what about you? You will round this up. What do you feel Black men need to feel supported in their journey with mental health? There you go.
At least a listening ear, somebody to be patient with us, somebody that's willing to listen without judgment. You know, just because we have certain issues and we're speaking to it doesn't mean we want you to try to fix it all the time, right? So just listen, offer advice when asked, and just be patient with us. That's really it. And continue to, to encourage us to seek therapy.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all my panelists. Before we wrap up, is there any questions from anyone here that you wanted to ask either myself or any of the panelists, or a comment that you wanted to make? I didn't get to go through all of them in the chat, but please feel free to ask right now. You can come off mute.
I'd love to make a comment if I can.
Okay, go ahead.
So real quick, I'm actually going to echo what I heard before. I think this was from Free G and Mike. So I've arrived at the conclusion that the only way to really feel supported, quite frankly, is to do it yourself. So my thing is, I'm making a concerted effort to link up with other men that are in the same kind of position as me. Not even just men that are husbands or men that are fathers, just men of value, right? Men that are about something, men that are of good character. Because quite frankly, I think just simply offloading helps a lot. Because as a Black man, you really don't have many people to talk to, unless you have really close friends you grew up with. You really don't. You can't do it at work. A lot of times you can't do it at home. You can't do it around your kids. Your wife doesn't really want to, she's more interested in you being her rock than, her being yours. It's not like that. So I think we kind of have to go back to how things used to be, almost like the ancient ways, where the men get together and you kind of bond and you keep yourselves as like one network. And you help one another, maintain your own level of operation, so that you're always operating at a high efficiency. So you're always stable. You can be weak around them because they understand. Because only men understand men at the end of the day. So that's my conclusion.
Okay.
That's a comment that I want to add.
Thanks, thank you, Sharon. Anyone else have a final comment before we wrap this up? No.
Women was quiet. I was surprised. I see a lot of women in here. I said the women were
Hi,
quiet.
good evening. I have a question.
Hi, hello.
Hi, Tommy. It's Ralph. I have a question.
What's good?
I'm good. Two parts. One part, should Black men code switch? And how do you support other Black men who are in leadership positions in, let's say, a corporate environment who don't have other Black men? I deal with that a lot.
Okay.
So, for the panel.
Okay, so one, explain what code switching is, and I'll leave it to my panelists before I answer as well.
Code switching, a lot of different interpretations, but I think it's the ability to sometimes lose your authenticity as a Black man to assimilate to the corporate work environment, which is typically led by the white men, to be able to work, and then you might leave work and dap it up, throw on your do-rag, relax, but but once you're at work, like, yes, good evening, gentlemen, how are you? Some may say it as that we're losing authenticity, or you just you're going after your goals and desires, and whatever that environment entails, you do it.
Okay. So to my panelists, who would like?
Yeah, I definitely. I wouldn't say if you know yourself, what you stand on, you know what you're in it for. Like, I'll leave. I'm a nurse, right? But before a nurse, of course, whoever's sitting in the seat where they had a past, there's certain friends you still probably mingle with who are don't add that great thing of value to your life, but then they do understand, like, hey, Mike, you got this going on, so right now, and I call that a real friend, to know that when they need to not involve you in certain things, I just feel like if no one's this is how I look at it. If no one's disrespecting me at work, and I think it's a beautiful thing as Black men, me personally, I love it that I have these different vernaculars where when I'm at work, I already know how to carry myself, and I know how to be and how to conform myself and things of that nature. And also when I leave work, I can relate to homies who are not in the same walks of life, because I don't look at them any different. They just some of them just don't know any better, and I never like, toot myself above them and try to make them feel like because of the position in life that I may be in or I'm aiming for and make them feel any different. So, me personally, I love it. But, at work, we've all probably been tested. And sometimes whether it is you don't like what's going on, me personally, I can't, whether my job is on the line or not, it's certain things I'm not taking home to bed with. I'm gonna speak on it at work, despite how they feel, whether they like it or not. And some people like it, some don't. But I promise you, when I come into work every day, everybody knows how to act accordingly before they approach me. I promise you that. So.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
What about you, Free? Before I from a female perspective.
Does anybody else want to speak? Because I don't want to go.
Oh no, you know, Free, you can't go first.
I don't want to speak.
No, Darnell, go ahead. You're so right, Free. You can't even go first no more.
No, I think we have to do what is called for us to do. Like, understand what job you took when you took the job. So if you took a job in a space where you aren't comfortable and you have to switch, well, that's also what you signed up for. But more importantly, before Black spaces and Black men can be comfortable in these spaces, we need to define for ourselves what is our baseline of professionalism? Because sometimes I think we confuse code switching with being professional. At work, you need to be professional. Until we have our own baseline of what professionalism is, we will have to adhere to their definition and their baseline of professionalism. And if that causes you to have to speak different or wear different clothes, you also know where you decided to work. So I think that process is changing as more and more businesses become Black owned and we are understanding how to navigate and own our own Black spaces, but we can't enter a white space and think we don't have to abide by those rules. I just think that will change.
Ken, what about you? Do you have a comment on it? I want to let my men into this because
yeah, I mean, there's this mantra that I have in my email, and it says change the way you see things and the things you see will change. Right. And I think that could apply to when it comes to being a black man, Black woman in probably, in a higher position where there's not too many of us in. And you could look at it like it's code switching, or you could look at it like, hey, I'm able to speak multiple languages. Right. So now I'm able to speak multiple languages. I have to speak what's being the language that belongs to that environment. And that's what I'm doing. When I go to a different environment, I'm able to speak that language, right? So, when it comes to it, the way you see it could change your mindset. And what happens too for us when we're in these positions, we become so preoccupied about us being like a very rare in that position that it takes away from our talent to what got us to that position. So we have to try to find a way to continue to move in a positive mindset, even if is not a lot of us there, because we're there. We made it. Let's make the best of it. Let's look at these things as strengths versus us being not being authentic. Let's look at it. Look, I speak multiple languages and I need to embrace that skill. And the funny thing is, sometimes when we're in these positions and then we go back to what we call the hood, people are like, yo, I can't believe you made it out there. I can't believe you do this. I can't believe you do that. They idolize you around it. But then we feel shame that we had to do any form of change to ourselves while we're there. So we want to look more so into our strengths in these situations. So, if that's what, Ralph, if that's your position right there, I'm happy for you, brother. I think you made it to a position that, that you're going to pretty much break the curse, if you want to call it that. And it's going to open up opportunity for others, that look like you to come in.
Okay, Free.
So
we're leaving you for last from now on because everybody else has spoken.
I like what everybody said was, I agree exactly what everybody is saying. I just to think about your purpose, right? So as Black men, right, one of the things that we survivors, right? Because we're an oppressed bunch. So we got to think about what your purpose is. Do you call it code switching, Or is it like I'm working towards something, so I got to do what I need to do to get to somewhere? But you shouldn't lose yourself. I think when people say things like code switching, they're kind of losing sight of themselves, or they feel like they're doing something that's not themselves. But if you got a purpose and you just working through the stepping stones to get into where you got to go, you're just doing what you have to do, right? I wouldn't switch as in like just be a whole new person just for the sakes of being a whole new person. But you know, like as Gordon said, we working on our own things. We got a lot of different things like we're kind of developing, and sometimes we have to kind of play the game, right, to get to where we got to go. And you know, as Ken said, we playing the game, right? Like that's just playing the game. You know, different languages, right? You can move in different rooms. That's a skill, right, to help you navigate to get to the next place. But I wouldn't personally tell anybody to just switch up who they are just to have a job, or you know, you gotta like, what's the purpose of what you're doing and what are you doing it for? All right. So
Okay, so Kareem, I'm gonna ask you to actually ask your
Thank you.
question. No problem, Ralph. But and to add to that, growth and comfort don't coexist. Man, woman, whatever you're doing, right? When I'm trying to get to a goal, I'm gonna move differently. When I went into my nursing program, master's, I was working a full-time job, I was working a part-time job, and I was doing clinicals and going on. So essentially I had 4 jobs. So does that mean I could go out every Friday or Saturday night like I used to? No. So if the people that you're calling friends or the spaces you go back to outside of that realm see it as you switching up, I would again look at your perspective, like who are you really going back to? Are those people funneling you to grow, or are they just comfortable when you're just out with them and you're at the same level? Because nobody wants, well, let me not say nobody, but if you have a purpose, if you have a goal, you're not going to be able to stay in the comfort zone that you're in currently. So I don't see it as code switching if when I get into certain spaces, if I go to interviews that I speak one way and then I'm comfortable speaking to someone else, I'm Haitian. When I'm around my American friends or friends that don't speak Creole, I'm not about to speak to you in Creole because I feel comfortable speaking Creole. No, I'm going to switch up and speak English. So it's the same thing. I mean, again, I guess it's just who you come back to, because I don't see it as code switching. I see it as you have a goal, you have a purpose. Growth and comfort don't coexist. I need to grow, so this is what I got to do. Now, if you're changing who you are altogether, if you feel like you're acting quote unquote more white, which is something I've heard, then that's something you need to speak to either a therapist or even look at yourself to see what are you really doing that seems like it's fitting into that code switching mentality. Kareem, you said something about code switching authentically versus inauthentically. What does that mean? If you can come off mute. Okay, Kareem can't come off mute.
In the meantime, they'll say thank you very much, guys, for the content. I think it's just reassuring. I don't think I have the problem. I think you know, I've grown and learned through it. But I think seeing the next generation of Black men, you know, not wanting to set them up for failure if they're not conforming to the environment rather than teaching them as they go through. So I think that's the challenge right now that I'm seeing in these environments.
Most definitely. I hope Kareem has a crying baby in his arms. All right, not a problem. But hopefully we answer the question. Beyond said that let's get back to calling each other brother or brother. We need back our warmth and the removal of distrust between us. That's one of the main reasons as to why some of us unravel. We need each other, which I most definitely agree with. So as Bjorn says that, I want to ask my panelists and maybe anyone here, what are some resources for Black men in mental health? What are some groups, some IGs? And I'll also put this together in like an IG post and I'll have it on awareness, but just for those who are here right now that might be seeking mental health help. I know some of you said you have private practice, but probably full. So what do you have as a resource?
I want to say I do have a private practice, but as you mentioned, so I'm full right now for individual counseling, but I am sparking up a men's group, multiple men's groups, and I'm having a men's group for 18 to 25, 18 to 25, 25 to 35, and 36 to, I think I'm at 36 to 50. So these are 3 groups that I'm kicking off. And, you know, if people want to join, it's an open group, meaning that you don't have to stick to it. So you could pop in, pop out. You know, you come one week if you want, if you feel it's not for you, or if the topic's not for you, you can come a different time. So, you know, this is, and, you know, when it comes to topics, I'm trying to hit the hot topics that, you know, like we talked about today, a lot of the topics that we talked about today, and especially, you know, more so towards men in building. So we're going to talk about finances, relationships, communication, managing emotions, all these things. So I think it'll be beneficial. It doesn't force you to, if you feel uncomfortable, if you're not ready, to feel like, all right, I'm doing therapy the traditional way. You know, you could, it's open dialogue. I'll facilitate it. We're going to keep it a respectful and safe place. It's all virtual. So you could be in a closet, you could be in a car, you could be driving, whatever, you know, and still participate. So, you know, I hope, you know, anybody here will want to join, and they could just reach out to me via email. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, I'm gonna gather all this information as well, and I'm gonna post it. I'll tag each one of my panelists. They are already tagged in one of the posts, but I'll tag them again with the resources that they give us tonight. What about you, Friji? Do you have any mental health resources or groups for Black men seeking mental health treatment?
So kind of similar. I'm pretty full, but there's a lot of like organizations I think folks should be a part of. And some people may think like just because the organization has like a certain niche, like I'm a part of Association of Black Social Workers, right? You don't have to be a social worker to be a part of that. That's Black people congregating. There's men in there. You don't have to be a Black social worker to go. These things are open forums. I'm also part of, so that's a group, right? And you can look them up. There's an international chapter, there's a New York chapter, but Association of Black Social Workers. Also, I'm a part of Caribbean Association of Social Workers. I might have even said that wrong. Caribbean Association of Social Workers, which is held in Flatbush. This is another group you could join. You don't have to be a social worker. They just do things in the community to kind of bring mental health awareness, bring resources, have conversations. These organizations they have older people in them, right? But the young people are starting to come and they need young blood, right? And there's avenues to network, there's avenues to collaborate on different things that people are doing. And I think it's really beneficial, and you can create groups outside of that. You could come in with different ideas, but there's tons of these types of organizations that exist. I would tell you, call like NYC Wells and stuff like that. You can call NYC Wells if you need, you know, some type of, if you're in some kind of emergency or just want to seek services. That's like a hotline that you can call. But I just think in general, just connecting with different groups of like-minded people, right? It doesn't have to be men's only, but if you can find men's groups as well, like Ken's group, right? And there's tons of other groups out there, but I mean, I'm a part of these two organizations, and I know they're always hosting weekly meetings. It's now virtual, but they also have remote locations in Harlem, in Brooklyn, and different spaces, and they host different events. And I think they always want people to kind of come out, and there's men there in different disciplines, and there's different conversations happening in those spaces.
So to my last two, who aren't necessarily in mental health, but both are writers, and both of you express yourselves through your writings and your performances. So what do you have as a resource for mental health that might help other Black men? Is it your writing, or do you have other things that you practice that help with it?
For me, it's certainly my pen. My pen is my therapist 95% of the time. It's how I get my thoughts out. And I like to think of it as me talking to myself. I actually learned so much about me through my writing, because initially it wasn't personal. I didn't think it was personal. And, you know, come to find out, these are hidden thoughts, or dark thoughts, or deep thoughts, or thoughts that I typically did not expose to people. Now you perform on stage and you have to exhibit that vulnerability. Honestly, I didn't even think about finding a therapist until after I started performing, because having to share your traumas and your feelings on a stage in front of a group of people, that isn't necessarily the way I would tell people to do it. It's probably easier to do it in a private session to discover yourself, but whatever works for you, I think that needs to be a personal choice. But I'm so happy I was part of this panel, because my guy Ken here, I didn't even know he was doing this. I haven't seen him in years. I didn't know he was putting these groups together, because my organization is trying to do something similar. So we will definitely talk, and we'll talk about that outside of here. But yeah, my therapist is my pen, but also finding friends, finding community, finding brothers. I have a group of friends that initially it might have been my own fault for not being as vulnerable and transparent with them when I've hit rough patches and rough parts in my life. But that finding a group and community that you could connect with, finding brothers that you trust, finding people that you trust, having friends that you trust, having a loved one or family or someone in a relationship that you trust, that is essentially the first resource that you might be able to find outside of yourself.
Definitely. And in terms of you and your childhood friend reconnecting out of essentially the blue, like most Black people like to say, look at God. But Mike,
yeah, look at God.
Mike, what's good? So is it your pen? Is it your performance? What is it for you?
It's everything all the way around, and anyone who wants to tap in and stay in touch with me, I stay in touch with them, shedding light. And when I released my first book, like a lot of people, because I get a lot of DMs, which I think I should be charging consultation fee, but I don't. But yeah, I get a lot of DMs because I definitely put my money up and travel and promote my stuff. But I always tell people, if initially you were doing this for the money, whatever it is you're doing and you're not passionate about it, you're gonna set yourself up disappointment. And those are one of the lessons I think that everybody, even on this panel, that going forward, just talking to certain people you have, because people won't understand it till they feel that. They won't get it. It's certain things certain people need to go through, no matter how much you tell them. They need to go through. I needed to go through to even understand why my second book is more successful than the first, only because I was so focused about money. The first book, the second book, it was more, I was building relationships and the money was just coming. But at times I found myself where it wasn't about a book sale. I was able to give books to certain people, and those people became like brothers. They became family. We chopped it up. They tapped in with me. I go to different states and meet different people and tap in with them. So, I'm not there yet where I could say I have an organization, but I definitely know that I tapped into a lot of people's lives for sure, and the DM speak for itself. And I could chop it up with certain people and just hold court anywhere I go, and it's just on a respect level, and it's not always about trying to make a dollar, because I built relationships. Because sometimes I've sold books, but I've given books away not knowing who I gave it to, and when I get that text message back like, man, this helped me, or this poem I could relate to this, or this I resonate with that, or just even going on stage. I used to go to a lot of poetry slams, a lot of poetry events. I mean, a lot of great poets. But what I used to get all the time, a lot of these poets, some of them was bitter. They were always mad. There was always anti-something, anti-this. And I'm like, nah, I ain't get into it for this. You know what I mean? I want to be happy. Because, I understand what they're expressing on stage, but some of the topics to me was like, okay, it made me like, I'm here just trying to do. I mean, there were times I went to a poetry slam and there was not one poet speaking about some happy shit. It was always about some anti-something or this or that. Like, so, and I realized I've been able to touch different topics, whether in a joking aspect or things of that nature. I mean, and in a comic relief way also, which helps where it because you'll go to certain places and think that poetry is supposed to be like this or it's supposed to be this way, but I feel like poetry is all around us if we look for it or whatnot. So like I said, I don't have an organization yet, but I do tap in with other people, and I do
You are the organization, Mike.
Oh yeah, for sure. But that's what I'm saying. Sometimes you building it and you don't even realize it. So I'm definitely grateful for that space, that being able to write has has made me look, challenge myself and look at myself in such a way, and being able to talk to certain people and the feedback that I get, it puts me in a different space to now that I can write differently, because you see the growth from the first, second book and how I speak and things of that matter. So, just, and this platform for me, I'm whether I'm on a panel or not, Sahami is fam, and I'm thankful to be part of the panel or just to be on the call, even if I had nothing to say. So that right there, this right here is definitely dope. You know what I mean?
Thanks so much. Thank you. And I also want to share another resource that I came around. I'm pretty sure a lot of you heard of him, The Black Therapist, but it seems like he also has a Black men and mental health group. So he's on IG. I saw this and I was like, I'll share it tonight, because it's two black male therapists doing exactly what we're doing right here. But so just so you know, and again, it'll be on a post as well. I also have my own private practice. I am actually accepting patients because I'm brand new, so I haven't taken on as much, but I do also see the importance of Black men opening up to other Black men. Of course, I'm not gonna turn you away, but I do hope you seek those who look like you and just chop it up with another Black man, because it's essentially what you're doing. Another Black man who's done the work that you're currently doing, that's healed his traumas, and now he's trying to help you heal it. That's all it is. That's all therapy is. And if you do get to a point where you should need medication, I hope you don't feel any shame about it, that you will reach out and get yourself that help. Never stop yourself from healing because of what it looks like to someone else. Because trust and believe, they're doing things to help themselves that you might not be aware of. So you sitting there trying to save face for them, if that's even considered saving face, letting yourself hurt in private, I don't think that's saving face. But they're doing things to help themselves while you're trying to look quote unquote cool or like you got it together in front of them. Meanwhile, you're completely hurting inside, which is exactly what happened to this young man. He was sitting there battling depression, whatever his battles were, and at the end of the day, he couldn't keep wearing 2 masks, and his final decision was suicide. So I don't want any men on here, any men that I know within my community, to feel like suicide is the right answer. It's the only answer. There's way too many resources that we as Black people have now come upon that we're trying to give to you, for you to think that suicide is the only option that you have in dealing with life's issues. So with that said, thank you to my panelists. Thank you so much for being vulnerable, for sharing your stories, for sitting here through 2 hours. It wasn't supposed to be 2 hours, but sitting here through 2 hours and answering questions and just giving us this conversation that was so needed. I seen someone said this should be 3 times a week. I don't know about that. Please look at the resources that I'm going to post. I will have another one of these for sure, because there are topics I didn't even get to really hit in my questions. And just look out for it. It will be on Awareness if you're not following me. Awareness.com is the website. My IG _AWRNSS_. Follow that for recap of tonight's event and whatever resources I get from that. Right, ladies and gents, again, thank you. Have a good night. Take care of yourselves, please.